Hello.
Good afternoon, Khaled.
Hello.
It's Seneca. It's just us in here right now.
Do you want us to share our slides right away, or do you want to do an intro? Welcome.
I will just do a quick intro. Yeah, we'll just be hey everyone, welcome, and set us up, and then we'll get going.
Sounds good.
Hey Kim. I wasn't sure if you were going to join us, so I'm glad to see you.
Sorry, it took me a minute there.
No. I noticed that like your calendar said you're on or out, and I'm like, oh no,
I was
Kim's
in
like gone this
Morris.
week.
I drove today
Ah,
and then my computer this morning crashed. So when I got home a little bit ago, I updated it and it took it a little longer. So I like seriously just finished clicking through everything and re-logging into everything. And then the webinar wasn't on my calendar. Like it doesn't show up in my Zoom just because of the way that the co-host thing was, or something was weird, but I'm here. I found it.
something was weird for me yesterday too. But well, yeah, so I'm hopeful that people have it and we'll see what happens.
Um, okay, so I see,
I just saw someone, yeah.
yeah, I just saw one. Um, Oddly, I still have the Mary one on my calendar as well, which is hard.
So I don't know what attendees can see right now.
Could you see the number of registrants we had?
Oh, 11 when I last looked. Let me look again. Well, I've got to set 3:02, and I'm going to go ahead and get us started in the interest of time. And as folks join us, they'll go ahead and join us, and there you have it. So good afternoon, everyone. Um, my name is Senege Anzenge. I'm the co-chair of the Minnesota Learning Commons for the 2024-2025 academic year, and we'd like to welcome you to the March 2025 webinar of the Minnesota Learning Commons. I'll go ahead and read you the mission of the Minnesota Learning Commons, which is the mission of the Minnesota Learning Commons, a joint powers partnership between the Minnesota Department of Education, the University of Minnesota, and Minnesota State, is to promote high-quality, online, blended, digital learning and support educators teaching in online, blended, and digital learning environments. The MnLC executes its mission through three primary areas of focus: professional development, collaborative projects, and advocacy for effective digital learning policy and practice. The MnLC is committed to advancing racial justice, equity, and inclusion in online and digital learning as a core component of this mission. And again, thank you everyone for joining us for this March webinar. I'd like to welcome the team from the University of Minnesota Office of Digital Accessibility to share with us some of the work that they've been doing around preparing the university and preparing educators in this shifting landscape to meet the recently proposed or the recently adopted Department of Justice digital accessibility guidelines, which are going into effect now and will affect all public institutions, but then also are good practice for our private partners to pick up as well. So with that, I invite our friends from the University of Minnesota Office of Digital Accessibility. There are a lot of acronyms at the University of Minnesota. So yes, to share with us some of their work and invite us to think about some things that we might take up in some of our own work. As they go ahead and present and so on, they will introduce themselves. And again, welcome and thank you very much for joining. I hand it over to you.
Thanks, Senenge. Appreciate it, and thanks for the invite. Hi, everyone. My name is Khaled, and we'll be talking today about the road for digital accessibility. That's how we're titling our work at the university for the next year and a half. As I mentioned, my name is Khaled Musa. I'm the Office for Digital Accessibility Director here, which is part of the Office of Information Technology and the Office for Equity and Diversity.
My name is Luke Kudryshov, and I'm the Senior Digital Accessibility Analyst at the Office for Digital Accessibility.
We have the slides, and they're you more than welcome to follow along. They're at z.umn.edu/MnLC-A11Y-slides. And Luke just added them to the chat. We'll be talking about the Title II, which is part of the Americans with Disability Act. We'll talk about the possible ways to approach this work. We'll talk about our 7 core skills. There are a lot of great tips here that you're more than welcome to use in your daily work or at your institution, at your department, at your unit, campus, whichever one you like. The Title II clarification was named non-discrimination on the basis of disability. So I'll talk about it a little bit more in a few minutes, but we'll have to set the groundwork for how we view our work, because everything nowadays that we do is digital. It's important to highlight that this work impacts everything that we do, whether it's an agenda that we're doing, a team meeting, an email that we're writing, or a course that we're teaching, or a presentation we're given. Everything is digital, and everything in it is being done digitally. Therefore, we have to make sure we consider accessibility as part of that digital work, and it impacts all of our teaching, learning, research, as well as outreach and education, and public service. This is important because accessibility is not a technical challenge. Accessibility is a change management challenge, and it's a mindset shift for a lot of people, where they have to learn new habits and new techniques, and that's what's difficult about it. So keep that in mind as we talk about this. Also, when it comes to accessibility, it's important to keep in mind It's also important to keep in mind that our work is a proactive approach, and it impacts everyone that we work with, whether it's students, educators, staff, or the public. Therefore, we're not addressing this towards people with disabilities. It's impacting everyone. It is essential for people with disability, but it is also beneficial for everyone. Because of that work, you'll hear us saying the ADA Title II clarification is a compliance initiative, but we're trying to demonstrate the impact of this work on everyone. And we believe that people will benefit more and when people understand the impact, the change comes a lot easier than compliance. Compliance might get them to the door, but commitment is what gets them to stay. So what is Title II? Title II, it says that no qualified individual should be excluded from any activity, program, or benefit just because they have a disability. We have to be able to provide an equal experience for everyone who's participating in our programs, irrelevant whether they have a disability or not. And everyone with a disability should be able to access the information that we're providing just as a person without a disability in the same equal manner. The new Department of Justice Title II, which again, the ADA existed since 1990. Title II is a clarification on it. Was published in April 2024 and gave large institutions 2 years to comply and smaller institutions 3 years to comply. And this is based, what they base their research on resources available. They think larger institutions should be able to comply a lot faster. Smaller institutions would need more time because they don't have as much resources or as much staff. The University of Minnesota is a land-grant public institution, and because we serve the entire state, the state population is what determines our size. A library or a government entity, office, or a school might take the population of that district or to determine their size. It would be beneficial if you're not sure which timeline you're following to talk to the Office of General Counsel at your school or at your institution, which would help with that. Accessibility has been a priority for a lot of us, and it's been part of the ADA since 1990, but a lot of people understood accessibility to mean ramps, elevators, accessibility, physical accessibility of buildings. A lot of people argued that our digital assets are not front doors for our services because they're not physical. Title II clarification helped clarify that and said if you have a website that is promoting your services, that is engaging, allowing people to engage in the activities you're providing or the services you're offering, that is your front door. People will receive benefits or engage in activities using that digital front door. Therefore, ADA applies, and Title II was clarified to match that. In our digital world, at least at the University of Minnesota, there's a lot of things that need to comply. We are a higher education teaching and learning institution. Therefore, we have an LMS, a learning management system that must comply with all of the pieces that go into it. All the document formats that we offer, whether it's part of classes, research, or outreach, must comply. Also, the third-party tools that we offer, whether it's books, handouts, platforms, and anything else that goes into what we do in our daily work, regular documents, forms, must comply. Third-party tools. We cannot do our work without the third-party tools that we buy or license to provide those services as part of our everyday, day-to-day business. Because accessibility has not been a priority for many of us, it's been delayed or deprioritized because even people who wanted to prioritize it, sometimes things jumped in front of it. The Department of Justice understood that in order to comply, they have to set some priorities and some lines in where the work must be done and where exemptions apply. So when it comes to exemptions, they understood that not all documents and not all content that is being used in a public institution is equal. They created five exemptions in the law. The five are archived, an archive exemption for library material, and those are typically old library content like old journal and newspaper articles, magazine articles, maps of the towns or the counties that the library will offer in a separate archival section, and those do not need to be made accessible. Old documents on websites that were published pre-2024 that are no longer being used to engage in program activities. Individualized password protected documents that are for a specific individual with a password set on it do not need to meet that accessibility standard. Also, all social media postings do not need to meet that. So think forward, starting today, and start to practice a good accessible skills going forward. So social media does allow for accessibility. And the last one is third party that you do not have a business relationship or a contractual agreement with to do business on behalf of the institution that you work for. If you sign a contract or agree to anything that third party provider is offering, then it fails that exemption, and you must push that vendor to make it accessible. It is worth noting that in the third party tools, the accessibility was not set for private for-profit institutions. It was set for us to push those vendors to be more accessible. So we have to put the pressure on publishers. We have to put the publishers on companies that are for-profit that we are licensing to do business on behalf of the university. One way to frame this work, because accessibility is part of every person's work at any given institution, we try to equate this to other initiatives that have been successful, that impact everyone, where a behavior change was the same. With security, everyone understands that if you click on a phishing link, you're compromising not only your data, but the data that you're been trusted with um, on behalf of that institution. So you have to learn to practice good secure behavior as part of that work. The same thing with Title IX and discrimination and harassment. We believe everyone has to play a role in order for such an initiative to succeed, and accessibility follows that same model. The social model of disability says that we all have a role to play. A person disability does not differentiate, or that's not the differentiating factors if the person is able to access your content or not. It's the fact that we're providing it inaccessibly is what's disabling the person. Therefore, we want to be proactive. We want to provide an equal experience for all when we're trying to create digital content that is accessible for everyone. Another analogy that we use when it comes to accessibility work is accessibility checking equals spell checking. On the right side of the screen, there's a document with lots of misspelled words and being magnified. Nobody would publish such a document on the web these days. Everybody uses spell check at the time of publishing, at the time of sharing, to make sure no misspellings are present. And we're trying to use the accessibility work with a similar cultural thinking that everyone treats spell checking, to make sure you do accessibility checking before you publish. This is important to highlight because a lot of our strategies will focus on individual work and then carry forward to larger work on a course or a larger site, but it starts with the page you're editing first. If you haven't prioritized this work in the last 5 years, if you haven't checked anything in the last 5 years, the first document you would spell check now is the one in front of you, the one you're working on. And that's what we want to tell people. It seems overwhelming now because we haven't prioritized it. But if you break it down with that analogy in mind, it would seem a lot more doable. Who are the agents representing each institution doing this work? The law does specify that the agents are staff, instructors, faculty, employees who are doing business on behalf of that organization that are representing that institution are the agents, not the participants of the programs. If you're a school or a university or a college, then your students are not part of that. If you're a public office or then you're the people participating or adding anything to that program do not have to comply. We have a framework that we set as a university for us. You're more than welcome to use it and copy it. We're calling it the 3R framework. The power of the 3Rs, it's a circle with 3Rs in it. The 3Rs resemble remove based on that spell check analogy. We remove anything we do not need anymore, revise and remediate, and review and revise, and then write first. So with the two, those or all three, they can be entered at any stage of that process. They're always applicable to any work you're doing. Then because it is iterative, it allows you to do the work whichever way is easiest for you. And this framework has been really good for us at the institution. A lot of people are understanding it, and we broke it into sprints or big chunks. So right now, a lot of our teams are working on removing old content and starting to prioritize the work. That's the first step of that process. So you can set that process with a cadence that works for your team, and it is flexible. That's what we love about it, that it can work with one individual or with an entire team. And you can set that strategy the way you'd like it to fit the needs of the digital content that you're working with. It could be weekly, it could be monthly, it could be quarterly, it could be semi-annually, whatever sprint people like to work on, or whatever existing structure you have with developers is different than a faculty, for example. With a staff member is different than a teaching assistant. So each person can use that framework and fit that with the sprint or the cadence that they have. So the remove stage sets that groundwork. The deprioritization of those old content, deleting all that stuff that you're no longer using, removing from your websites, from your courses, from your document folders to make sure it's put in an archive. I no longer use this. I will keep it as an archival folder or reference folder that if I ever need to pull it out and use it again, I will accessibility check it before I publish it. That's the remove stage, to make sure you remove all old content out of the way so you have the remaining things to worry about to review and revise. And in that stage, it's good to start learning the skills necessary for this work. And because accessibility, you have to learn the different resources that are available in order to learn the different skills needed for each of them. You can do it one skill at a time. We have what we call the 7 core skills, which Luke will go over. You can learn one skill at a time, use accessibility checkers often and as much as you can as you're doing it. And if you make mistakes, this is the time to make it. We are okay, and we understand that. And while people are learning, they will make mistakes during this stage, because after April 2026 for us and April 2027 for smaller institutions, they need to become a right first strategy, meaning anything that is published at the time of publication must be accessible and must be done right from an accessibility checking perspective. So running accessibility checks is really important. You have to run it often, and you have to do it all the time, get used to it, to the way the spell checks are working. So that's part of it. Um, and you have to make sure your content is right. We have tools that we can give you examples of what we're using, but at your institution, it might be different. So in our websites, we use Drupal as our content management system. So we have a page-by-page checker called editorially, or the wave checker, and then the Pope Tech system for the scanning the entire site. On courses, we have the rich content editor accessibility checker, and you do it for the entire course checker. And then both Pope Tech and you do it do give us a high level scan that we're able to run on our entire instance of Pope Tech, of Drupal, or Canvas in that instance. So those are the web accessibility checkers, editorially, and Pope Tech. There are screenshots of each of them, and there's 3 issues detected in the bottom right of the screen for editorially on a page checker. And the Pope Tech dashboard gives you a high-level overview in case you missed anything if you didn't. So again, this fits the strategy by removing on a page-by-page or the entire site, either way, and then revising for a content contributor. The strategy might be different than a whole web administrator. So this is the Wave Accessibility Checker. Some people prefer that. There's other tools as well, the Axe Development Accessibility Checker or Site Improve. There's a million of them out there, but the one we recommend at our institution is the Wave, and the Pope Tech engine is based on it. Editorially matches that. So you want to be as consistent as possible, so everyone is learning together at the same time. There are document accessibility checkers. So Microsoft has a built-in one. And on the left, there's a screenshot of that accessibility checker. It's under the design tab of a Word document or a slide, PowerPoint slides. On the right, we have, because we are a Google school, we have Grackle Doc enabled for all of our faculty, instructors, staff, as well as students to use it. And we try to promote people to use it all the time. So it gives you, the Grackle Doc does give you 22 tests that it checks the document against. You're more than welcome to use it on. It's also free for anybody with a Gmail account. If you want to install it on your own document, your personal document, and check it, it's free. But for a university or like ours, it's a paid product. So with that, Luke will share some resources going forward.
Yep, thank you, Khaled. So first we wanted to share a few flowcharts that we've made to help guide decision-making processes around some of these questions. So first we have a decision flowchart for writing alternative text for images. And you can kind of peruse this at your own time. I think the slides have been shared in the chat, but I'll just show a couple of examples. So it is kind of a fairly complex. We had a lot of questions around how to write good alternative text, and this is designed to help guide you through figuring out what you actually need to include in the alternative text. For example, if the image has text and the text isn't presented elsewhere on the page, then you should include all of that text in the alternative text tag. But if the text is presented elsewhere on the page, then you can just mark the image as decorative so you don't repeat the same information. And as another example, if the image is used as a link or a button, then instead of describing just the image, you want to make sure to describe the destination that the link is taking you to. So just a few examples to help guide that kind of complex decision-making process. And we have a similar flowchart for documents, figuring out what kind of document format to use, how to make it accessible. The main message here is to prefer using websites, kind of HTML, LMS pages, for example, like in Canvas or Blackboard, or web pages instead of documents if at all possible. That is a lot easier to maintain accessibility, and it's generally just more accessible for people. If it does have to be a document, then we recommend using either Google or Microsoft products, for example, Google Slides or PowerPoint, Google Sheets or Excel, Google Docs or Microsoft Word, rather than PDFs, and PDFs as a last resort, because it's much harder. It's much harder for you to make something accessible in a PDF. It takes a lot longer, and it has a lot of accessibility limitations. So those are just some general guidelines for document accessibility. And for forums, it's kind of similar. We prefer web forms when possible. They're just much easier to make accessible, and it makes for a much better user experience for people using assistive technologies. And if it does have to be a forum, then you can create an accessible PDF form, but that does take a lot more effort. And a few action items to get you started. So first, you can learn and practice the 7 core skills, which I'll go over in a minute. And these are really helpful kind of places to start to learn to pick up a few of the most common issues that we see with accessibility. And then, as Khaled mentioned, use accessibility checkers early and often in your process, and whatever kind of digital document or website you're working on, it probably has an accessibility checker that you can use. For people who manage websites, we have a suggested strategy following the 3R model. So first, you would inventory all of your websites and pages, then remove any content that you don't use, so you can focus on the content that actually needs to be remediated. Then use accessibility checkers to determine what kind of issues there are. Then make sure to train anyone who edits the website on the 7 core skills and on using accessibility checkers. Then for the work that needs to be done, prioritize it. You can focus on the largest number of issues first, or the most visited pages first, or on a specific category, so fixing all the alternative text first and moving on to headings, for example, whichever works best for you. And then setting whatever cadence works for you to work on those issues, aiming to fix all of those errors by April 2026 or 2027, depending on which timeline applies to your institution. And then making sure to create onboarding for new editors going forward, so you're not playing whack-a-mole with new issues arising. So you're making sure that doing that right first approach, so any new content that gets created will be created accessibly. And then after that, after you fixed all of the automated issues, you can start thinking about a manual audit, and we have some resources available on manual audits as well. And now we want to talk about some of the things that actually make a document or website accessible. And it makes a huge difference if everyone learns and practices these 7 core skills. And these skills are alternative text, color contrast, headings, descriptive links, bulleted lists, properly formatted tables, and video and audio with captioning and audio descriptions. These skills are applicable to any type of digital content that you work on, like documents, websites, emails, social media, online courses, really any kind of digital material that you're working on. These would be relevant. That's why we call them the 7 core skills. And I'll go through these briefly just to give you an introduction. So first, alternative text provides a text description for images for people who can't see the images. For example, people who are blind and use screen readers that read out all of the information on a page. And you don't need to include image of or picture of. The screen reader already communicates that, so you can just dive into what exactly is going on. So for example, in this image that I have on the slide, it says, the alternative text says, Maria Genie interacts with a small humanoid robot, both facing slightly to the side in an environment suggesting a workshop or a laboratory setting. The person appears delighted and intrigued by the robot. So you just want to be really brief, 1 to 2 sentences describing the main purpose of the image. And the alternative text really depends on the context that it's placed in. So the same image may have different alternative text in different contexts. You want to think about, why did you include that picture in the first place? What is it trying to communicate? And not only is this good for accessibility, it also improves search engine optimization when content is crawled by search engines as well. And in the slide notes, we have a link to a accessibility tool, an AI tool from Arizona State University that can also generate automated image descriptions. We recommend reviewing those and making sure they're correct, and they might need some human editing, but it's a good place to start if you're not really sure where to start at all. And color contrast is important for people with low vision or people who have color blindness, or even people who are in low light situations, for example, using a phone outside in the glare or using night mode and grayscale for reading at night. So it's important in a really wide variety of contexts. And it is important both for text and for graphical elements. And for text, it's important not just for kind of text that's written on the page, but also any text embedded in images. So here we have two examples. The one on the left has this text in the heart is really low contrast. It's black on red. It can be really difficult for a lot of people to read. Whereas on the right side, we have this gold text that's also has a black background behind it, so it's much easier to read for everyone. And that color contrast ratio is 4.5 to 1 for normal text size. And we have some tools in the slide notes as well for figuring out what those colors are and what the contrast ratio is. Link text is really important for assistive technologies. And like alternative text, it also increases the searchability and search engine optimization of your web content. It's important to use concise, meaningful link text that provides information about where that link is going. So some examples of good link text are creating accessible link text, difference between accessible, usable, and universal design, article, The Whale of Ignorance, and an email address, abc@umn.edu. And some bad link text are links, non-descriptive links like learn more, click here, and a really long URL that's really hard to parse, especially if it's spoken around by a screen reader. And then just something just says email us without a clear information about who us is, where that email is going to. And you want to keep it short. You also don't want to use a full sentence. Just keep it to kind of the shortest amount that is actually descriptive of where the link is going to. And if it's going to a file or video or opening a resource in a new window, you should note that in the link text as well. Bulleted and numbered lists are important to help break up content and provide sequencing for processes or procedures. They're really helpful for screen reader users to be able to kind of understand the structure of of the content. So you can use a bulleted list to show a list of related items and a numbered list to show steps in a process, like directions, recipes, how-to guides, or number of parts in a whole. And you want to make sure to use the built-in bullet formatting of whatever editor you're working on. So don't use emojis or dashes or symbols instead of using the proper bullet formatting options, because those won't be parsed correctly by screen readers. Headings are important because they provide semantic order to information within a page, email, or document. They're often the first thing that screen reader users use to navigate through the content on a page or a document. And you want to make sure to use the correct order of headings. So don't skip headings. You should have a single heading level 1 at the top of the page. So here we have vegetables from Wikipedia as the heading level 1. And then everything below that heading, that's a subheading of the top heading, should be a heading level 2. So we have different types of vegetables that are heading level 2s. And then anything that's a subheading of a heading level 2 should be a heading level 3. And then if you need to go deeper, you can do a subheading of a heading level 3 with a heading level 4 as well. And you want to make sure to use headings in the correct order and correctly structured, don't use headings just for stylistic purposes. And a lot of the time in editors, web editors, and Word editors, you can change the styling as you need to. So you can actually adjust the styling instead of using the headings for styling. Tables should be used to present data within a document or a website. They should not be used for design or layout purposes, that can make it really difficult for a screen reader user to interact with the page and understand what's going on there. It's important to include row and, if relevant, column headers to define the cell content. So don't just mark a header row as bold, but actually properly mark it as a header row. And don't leave any cells empty. If there isn't any data available, then use NA, like pictured on this table in the slide. And it's also helpful to provide some contextual information to help users understand the data presented. For example, with a caption up here, this table says University of Minnesota enrollment by campus. So that makes it easier to understand what the table is communicating. And you also want to make sure the other 7 core skills are followed, like ensuring that color contrast is correct within and is sufficient within the tables. And finally, for video and audio content, video captions and audio transcripts are really important for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, people who are learning another language or whose native language doesn't match the audio content. For example, international students, people who have learning disabilities or other cognitive impairments, people who learn by taking in information in multiple ways, people who are in quiet environments where audio output might not be an option, for example, in a library, or people who are really noisy environments where you might be able to play something, but you can't really hear or understand it. People who don't have equipment that supports audio output, if someone doesn't have their headphones with them, for example, they could really benefit from captions. And people who are looking for information contained in a video and don't have time to watch the whole video, it's helpful to be able to search in a transcript. And that again increases search engine optimization as well. For captions, it's important to know that auto-generated captions are not sufficient. You need to edit the captions to make sure that they're correct. A lot of the time the grammar is off, it doesn't pick up names correctly or some complex words. So you need to, it can be a good start, but you need to make sure to edit the automated captions to make sure they're correct. And audio descriptions for video content also provide access to people who are blind or have low vision, who are learning another language, who have learning disabilities or other cognitive impairments, or who are in a visually stimulating environment where you might not be able to look at a video, but you still need to follow along with what's going on. Like if someone is watching a video when they're exercising or driving. And yeah, and it's for audio only content, it's important to include transcripts as well. These are just a few more resources that we have for you to learn more about kind of some of these concepts that we just went over. And with that, we'll open it up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Colin. Thank you so much, Lou, for sharing that brilliant information with us. The floor is open for questions, and we have some attendees out here. While folks are taking a minute to kind of formulate their thoughts and process everything that you shared, a question that I have, given that, we're from the University of Minnesota, and you've given us some things to think about and talked about how these things matter in our context. And these Department of Justice accessibility guidelines, these are something that we talk about in higher education spaces quite a bit. But can you say something a little bit to why our friends in K-12 might care about some of these, or why they might want to pay attention to some of these things, if they, especially right now when they may not be required to address these things. And as you're sharing these comments too, if they are required to address some of these issues, if you could point that out as well, that'd be helpful. Thanks.
Public K-12 schools are part of that initiative. They have to think about the way they're providing this service. But one thing that K-12 schools have is part of the IDEA Act, students with disabilities have IEPs, and they might have paraprofessionals working with them and students, but still accessibility is preferred because a lot of the teachers in K-12 schools are not providing the paraprofessionals or the professionals who are adapting that material to their students in time, and sometimes are getting it the day before or the day of. So some of that stuff, making that accessible and making all of the information in the curriculum accessible is better for all the students and the professionals working with those students. But public schools, elementary, middle, and high schools must comply as well.
Thank you
Um,
for that.
Yeah,
Sorry,
thank
Kim,
you.
go
And
ahead.
I know I was just gonna say, I've now seen your slide deck twice, slightly adapted from the U of M presentation at the PNA Senate and now for the Minnesota Learning Commons. And I think it's just very helpful. So I appreciate the information that you've shared. I think your presentation simplifies Title II a little bit to make it manageable. It puts it into pieces that I can wrap my mind around. So I really appreciate that. And Senenge's question that points to public schools, I think also just should point all of us to general communication, knowing that anyone at any time in our audience can benefit from fully accessible materials. And so whether we're sending a message for our own kind of social engagements or for an entrepreneurial endeavor or for our work, it makes sense to make it accessible. And so your information that helps us know how to do that is really great. Sorry for that lengthy just thought process. Um, there is a question in the Q&A regarding alt text. What do you recommend for screenshots that are included in, as an example, instruction documents about learning management systems, technology platforms, etc.? So when you're teaching somebody to use those technologies, I think is what we're looking for. And the screenshot might
Yeah.
guide.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say it really depends on the context and kind of thinking about what you're intending to communicate with that screenshot. And it can be most helpful, I think, for if it's kind of walking someone through a process, for example, how to set something up or how to do a particular thing. It's helpful to just write out those steps in the surrounding text as opposed to trying to fit all of that into a single alt text. So you can kind of write out steps and make sure the steps are something that someone can follow if they're using a screen reader. So instead of just saying, click this red button or something, like say, click the button that says this or something. So don't just use positional or visual elements to describe it, but use the actual labels and kind of walk someone through exactly what they need to do to get to a certain point. And then the alt text if you describe everything kind of in the surrounding text, then the alt text can just be really brief. You can just say screenshot of whatever this is, but that the main information is conveyed in the kind of process. That would be my recommendation for. And if you're just including a screenshot, just to show, like, for example, we have, like on these slides, we just show like the Pope Tech dashboard to show that we have Pope Tech available, then that's a different purpose. We're not telling someone how to use Pope Tech. We're just saying this is what a Pope Tech dashboard looks like. In that case, the alt text can just say screenshot of a Pope Tech dashboard or something along those lines.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
Mm-hmm.
If you do use a screenshot that is meant to convey visual information as a how-to, it might have an arrow with a circle or where to click or something like that. Would you ever use alt text and a potential link with the image to say link to detailed instruction or something like that? So that you don't have it, because you might end up with a document that has point by point by point by point instructions that gets very long, where some of those you could put into another spot that would take people to the full description as needed. Would that still be accessible?
Yeah, it's fine for complex images for long descriptions to be either integrated into the main content or to link out to a separate page or a separate like a appendix in a document or something along those lines, as long as it's all of the information is included that's considered accessible.
Thanks.
Yeah. Question that I have is, I think maybe I don't know if I don't know if it is exactly an accessibility question, but I do think it's accessibility adjacent. So at the beginning of this presentation, you all shared your slides kind of at the beginning, as almost maybe it was on the very first slide. My question is about sharing materials beforehand. Does that improve accessibility? Is that an accessibility like feature or consideration? If, for example, if we had had these slides and had shared them out to registrants ahead of time, is that a suggested practice? I imagine it's good practice, a decent practice, but is it a suggested practice? Is that a thing that we would like to see more people doing, or is it just extra?
It's an inclusive practice. I wouldn't force it. But yeah, we share it all the time. I think some of this stuff, if you share it in advance, like the flow chart or some of those analogies that we use, will make a lot more sense if you're watching the recording and following the slides to get that resources after the fact.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Yep, and yeah, if you're sharing it, you should definitely make sure that it's created accessibly too. So everyone with assistive technology can read it.
We have another comment in the Q&A about what the link that you shared means with the A11Y. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, A11Y stands for accessibility, and there's 11 letters in between A and Y, and it also kind of reads like ally, so it's kind of a shortened way, so people don't have to write out accessibility all the time. It's a shorthand in the community.
It's true when you mentioned spell check. Spell check gets me on accessibility often, but I don't have to ask it. It just fixes it.
There are AI engines that will do that for you coming soon. So there is an alt text memoranda of rights is what I call it. If you don't provide an alt text for an image, one will be provided for you. It might not be the one you wanted. So you have to double check it.
Yeah, actually, like Microsoft programs, I think Microsoft PowerPoint already, and maybe even Word already provide automated descriptions if you don't provide one, and all the time they're not all that accurate. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
important to actually review those and provide your own alt text.
I did not realize that, and that is a really interesting thought to think, what have I put out there in images of people or whatever there might be that I would rather generate my own alt text.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yep. That's why we say do write your own alt text because you're given that context that you want, not the one that AI is guessing.
Since you brought up AI too, I don't know if you can make a connection, or I don't know if this is even a speculation here, but just what we're talking about and the role that AI is playing in different spaces to increase or improve accessibility. Um, is there concern that this might make users lazy? Right? The accessibility isn't a new concept, and we've been talking about it for a while. For many of us who have been doing a number of different things, implementing different tech tools. And frankly speaking, as somebody who is quite guilty of it myself, I've been talking about it for a while, a lot longer than I've been attempting to do it. I'm not even saying that I'm doing it just yet, right? I'm still only attempting to do it and moderately successful in some spaces. And now as I see AI, and to your point, since AI can kind of do some of that for me, I do fear myself maybe getting lazy, or getting even, or going back to reverting to the previous state of laziness when it comes to accessibility. So is that a concern? Or is it not a concern as some of these things are kind of rising in tandem?
I'll use the spell check analogy again. I mean, the spell check sometimes fix things for you. It just makes you a better, if you're typing fast, you're doing things fast, it just makes you a better productive person, in my opinion. I think we want people to continue to do what they're doing. We just want them to do it accessibly. We're not trying to change their behavior. A lot of people have misconceptions about accessibility that it'll I have to dumb down my content in order to make it accessible, and that's not true. So I think it just makes things much more accessible for everyone, and it makes you a more productive person. AI is not going to take our jobs, but someone who's using AI will take our jobs because they'll be more productive than us. So we have to use AI as we're doing this work. That's the way I think about it. I think it's a technology like every other one. Spell check was radical at the time because it thought they see a lot of people thought that people are not going to learn how to spell anymore, right? Because spell check is doing it for them. But no, that's not true. I think people, you know, that they became faster typists and even better spellers.
Yep.
And now
Yeah, and I
people
think
on learning to type. People won't learn to type anymore.
yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind the limitations too. Like with spell check, it can be really helpful, but it can sometimes get things wrong. So you do need to still have some human oversight. And it's similar with accessibility. Like Kimberly mentioned, like some of the alt text that's auto-generated might not actually be conveying the messages you want to be conveyed. So it's yeah, important to realize that it's not going to replace. And same with like AI automated captions. A lot of the time they can get fairly accurate, but they rarely get all the way there. So important to have human oversight too.
I think particularly in highly technical or in fields of education where you're using a very specific terminology, the spell check and captioning and things like that can be quite inaccurate just because the terms are not
Yep.
in the day-to-day vernacular. We do have another question in the Q&A about Google Forms. It says, is it true that Google Forms aren't accessible? Sorry, my own speech sounded like forum a little bit there, but forms, like the multiple choice kinds of question things that we fill out. Oh,
Colin,
Our favorite form tool is Google Form because of the accessibility inherent and the ease of use. Like anything you create in Google Form is accessible and people don't have to learn too much. Unless you're adding an image, you have to write the alt text for it. So, you know, the same 7 core skills apply.
I think with images, actually, I tried this recently with a Google form and they didn't have an option to add alt text. I would say maybe avoid images in Google Forms, but other than that, it's pretty accessible.
Qualtrics is the other one we use, and Jadu is another product that we have here at the university.
Yeah, with
Micro
Qualtrics, you have to avoid some of the question types. They have documentation about that because it's a lot more complex. So it's easier to mess up the accessibility if you use inaccessible question types.
Microsoft products, they do have forms. It's not by default. You have to be a Microsoft school with the full suite to use it. Each form product is different. What we steer people away from is PDF forms. Those are one of the hardest to make accessible.
I guess that's surprising to me because one of the first and early areas that I even frankly learned about accessibility was when people would talk about PDF readers. And so like to hear that PDF forms are inaccessible, that's news to me.
No,
Interesting.
no. We say the hardest to make accessible. They're not inaccessible. They're not.
Gotcha.
They're just harder to make accessible.
Okay.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work to make a PDF,
Yeah.
especially a PDF form or a complex PDF accessible, but even just kind of basic PDF accessibility, Adobe is just very clunky. It's possible to make it accessible, but it's going to take a long time.
all right.
Or
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
the last one I was going to say, read only the PDFs. A lot of people use PDFs because they think their document is protected. And honestly, that's a misconception. Any document offered via PDF, anybody can take that content out of it and transform it any way they want. I think Google Docs or Microsoft Word documents are better for just accessibility and easier to maintain.
Awesome. Thanks for getting to that question. I think that brings us to about the end of our time. Sanenge, do you have any final words here?
I agree that I do think we are at the end of our time. Just to thank Luke, and thank you, Khalid. Both of you from the University of Minnesota Office of Digital Accessibility. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon, for sharing this information and addressing our questions as they came up. We look forward to sharing a recording of this webinar with the broader Minnesota Learning Commons community. And we expect that, that there will be interest in this. There will be questions as people learn more, as people engage more, as people start doing more. And I think very selfishly, Kim and I probably look forward to being able to reach out to you as some of these questions come up and as we hope to learn more and be able to inform our constituents a little bit more. With that, again, we thank you very much for coming and sharing with us.
Thank you for the important work you're doing.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank you
much.
so much for having
Appreciate
us.
it.
And everyone, thank you so much for attending this afternoon's webinar. We look forward to seeing you on future webinars. And thanks again for participating with the Minnesota Learning Commons. Good afternoon, everyone.